nationalists written all over it. It's evident to me, and probably to you by now, that the people behind this project are Christian nationalists. They want theocracy light because all of their views come from a very specific conservative Christian framework about how God has ordered things. Hello friends, welcome back. Let's get into Project 2025. A lot of you have been asking me, please can you cover this? And here's the reality. One of the reasons why I've had a hard time making a lot of content on this is because this is a massive endeavor. The playbook is 900 pages. A lot of it is legalese. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an expert in law. I help people understand the connection Christian nationalism has to the far right political agenda that we're seeing. So here's what we're going to do. I actually found an amazing video created by a YouTube account called Legal Eagle. I'm a huge fan of that account. They cover all kinds of legal cases happening in society and kind of give the breakdown of what's going on and what if something is illegal or legal or what it actually means. And we're going to watch that video, a video by them, on Project 2025, and I'm going to add in some of the connections to Christian nationalism that they miss. I think this is the best way to give you the most fair picture because, frankly, there's a lot of stuff out there online. Project 2025 wants to make it look like The Handmaid's Tale again, right? And then people are like, no, you're exaggerating. But the nice thing about this video is that they actually go through the whole 900-page playbook and pull out excerpts, and they pull out the statements backing up their claims, and that's important to me. So hopefully this will be a really good primer for you to understand why so many folks are concerned about Project 2025. So here's what we're going to do. I have a video over here, there we go, and we're going to go through it together kind of piece by piece, and we'll respond. I'll help fill in the gaps, make the connection of why Christian nationalism is behind this, while also letting the experts over here at Legal Eagle explain to you why Project 2025 is as bad, if not worse, than you think. We ready? We buckling up? Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I would love to read your comments. I would love to hear what you think as we go through this. Let's get into it. Here we go.
You might have heard about Project 2025. It's the handmaiden-esque conservative plan to reshape the federal government under the next presidential administration. It was created by the conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation, and has deep connections to the Trump administration. But of course, it's so sweeping and draconian that even Donald Trump has had to try to attempt to distance himself from it. It's 900 pages of crazy pants insanity. And while Trump has said he doesn't know anything about it, it could form the backbone of his next presidency. Honestly, there was only one person who could do justice to the rage-inducing, sweeping legal and governmental changes that Project 2025 is seeking to implement: chaos lawyer Liz Dye.
Really quick, that's quite the intro. Like, the music is so intense. If you're watching this on YouTube with me, great job to the editing team. They obviously have a great team behind them making this content really pop. But yeah, I mean, that's the premise, right? Is Project 2025 is crazy pants. It is an insane playbook that would fundamentally reshape America. Is that true? Well, let's hear what a lawyer has to say about it.
Thanks, Devin. I've spent the past couple weeks poring over this manifesto, and I think I've got a pretty good handle on it. These guys really, really hate immigrants and pronouns, and they love local control. Well, unless the locality wants to let women control their own bodies or treat undocumented immigrants like human beings or be nice to gay and trans kids. Also, they're really mad about porn. The introduction refers to 4 broad fronts that will decide America's future. Number 1, restore the family as the centerpiece of American life and protect our children. Number 2, dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American people. Number 3, defend our nation's sovereignty, borders, and bounty against global threats. Number 4, secure our God-given individual rights to live freely, what our Constitution calls the blessings of liberty.
Okay, if you grew up in white evangelicalism, you pretty much just heard right-wing talk radio in those 4 points, right? I mean, right away, when I hear this, I think, yep, this is what a lot of evangelical Christians, especially today's Christian nationalists, are advocating for. So while they haven't mentioned the word Christian nationalist, I'm just letting you know these 4 points that they brought up reek of a Christian nationalist agenda that led to these 4 pillars.
What makes these 4 pieces of the conservative promise so valuable to the next president is that they cut through superficial distractions and focus on the moral and foundational challenges America faces at this moment of history.
Yep.
And okay, Who doesn't want to protect children, right? I mean,
True.
Raise your hand if you hate freedom.
Bueller.
But as always, the devil is in the details.
Oh.
And you don't have to scroll very far to figure out what those details are. Because on the very next page, these guys tell you very clearly that they think America's problems could be solved if everyone would just get married and stay that way. Who's to blame for what ails us? Unmarried mothers, because there is no government program that can replace the hole in a child's soul cut out by the absence of a father. Fatherlessness is one of the principal sources of American poverty, crime, mental illness, teen suicide, substance abuse, rejection of the church, and high school dropouts. That's a bold claim, although they cite no source for it.
Exactly. That's the thing. They make claims. And is this not how Christian nationalism operates? They make ridiculous claims. They don't cite their sources. And by the way, notice how in that phrase, rejection of the church was in there. That's another dog whistle, right? The people crafting this are obviously tapped into the current Christian nationalist ethos that is permeating, in particular, white evangelicalism. And if you want data on that, Robert P. Jones, the PRI Institute, has done the research on this and has demonstrated that Christian nationalism is mostly concentrated in white evangelical spaces. About 2/3, roughly, give or take, of white evangelicals subscribe to some form of Christian nationalism. So again, even we're just a few minutes in, I hear these things and I go, Yep. It sounds like there are some conservative Christians behind this.
Nor is it clear what role the government should play in ensuring that children stay in the church. And anyway, how is the government going to convince parents to stay married? They're going to cut food stamps, obviously, because if you can feed your children without a husband, then, and then they're going to delete the terms sexual orientation and gender identity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, gender equality, gender equity, gender awareness, gender sensitive, abortion, reproductive health, reproductive rights, and any other term used to deprive Americans of their First Amendment rights from every federal rule, agency regulation, contract, grant, regulation, and piece of legislation that exists.
Can we just think about that for a second? How moronic that statement is? That they would get rid of terms that would deprive people of their First Amendment rights. By deleting those terms, you're actually depriving people of their First Amendment rights. And again, all of these things, sexual orientation, gender identity, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, this is right-wing talk radio talking points. This is Turning Point USA's talking points, right? Which makes sense because Turning Point USA is one of the 100 or so conservative organizations that are behind Project 2025. So, absolutely.
After that, they'll outlaw porn. And then they're going to ban abortion nationwide and deport 20 million undocumented people, and then we'll all live happily married ever after. Also, tax cuts for big business and the 1%. Oh, and they're going to cut all funding for PBS and the Center for Public Broadcasting because Big Bird. Okay, guys, glove up. We're going in.
Hey, really quick, in case you're listening to this on podcast and audio only, the little swooshes that you hear is an animation of a highlighter actually highlighting from their own documentation what they're saying. So this lawyer is not just saying things or even summarizing perspectives of Project 2025. She's reading verbatim excerpts from their 900-page playbook. Keep that in mind.
Project 2025 is a plan to reshape the entire country using the power of the federal government.
Yep.
It's got a chapter on how they plan to reform every major agency of the executive branch. And so it's a little weird that the document mentions abortion 199 times, because it's been illegal for the federal government to fund abortion since 1971, with exceptions for rape, incest, and to protect the life of the pregnant person. The Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in the Dobbs decision in 2022, theoretically returning the issue of abortion to the states. So how can abortion figure so prominently in a blueprint for federal policy?
Exactly.
One of the main things these guys want to do is ban abortion nationwide. So the document contemplates all the ways that the federal government can use its power over education, insurance, labor regulations, and healthcare to ensure that no one can access abortion anywhere in America. And they
Yes. That's the whole mirage about this idea of we want small, limited government. No, they don't. They want to use the federal government as a sword to enact their ancient, archaic worldview that would put people who are pregnant in serious danger. And if you want proof of that, look at Texas. their infant mortality rate has risen since they've enacted draconian level abortion bans. Right? So this is the oxymoron. They might say they want to dismantle or abolish major parts of the federal government. In reality, they want to transform the federal government to become a weapon for their theocratic beliefs. That's the key.
Want to wield foreign aid to try and make sure that no one in the rest of the world has access to abortion either. As with most of Project 2025, the chapter on their plans for the Department of Health and Human Services was written by a Trump administration alum. In this case, Roger Severino, who worked at the Justice Department under Donald Trump. He believes that we should eliminate the HHS Reproductive Health Care Access Task Force and install a pro-life task force to ensure that all of the department's divisions seek to use their authority to promote the life and health of women and their unborn children.
Except for giving those women food stamps, as we saw earlier, right? So again, there's always caveats, and these caveats always seem to make it more difficult for pregnant people to actually access things that they might need, because that's big government all of a sudden.
Additionally, HHS should return to being known as the Department of Life by explicitly rejecting the notion that abortion is health care.
Wow.
Abortion is a complicated issue. People of good faith can disagree here. But the problem with Project 2025 is that it pretends the issue is not complicated. Even states like Texas, which ban abortion completely, have a provision in the law providing an exception to protect the life and health of the mother. Because in fact, some women will die or suffer grave health consequences if they cannot access abortion. Whether that provision in the law actually ensures access to care is another matter. Some pregnancies are the result of rape or incest, and most Americans think it should be legal for women to access abortion in those tragic circumstances. But Project 2025 simply pretends all that away with ominous references to the global abortion industry, as if there was a company called Big Abortion that was advertising 2-for-1 deals on every platform to get you to come down to the abortionplex and hop into the stirrups for another round.
Let me just say, she's totally right here. And also another example of how draconian abortion restrictions hurt women. Look at the story of Katie Cox in Texas, right? Her fetus was diagnosed with trisomy 18. It's a condition that almost never ever survives beyond at most a few weeks. The pregnancy was affecting, according to her doctors, her future fertility, and also, of course, causing grave physical consequences to her body. And she could not get access to an abortion in Texas. She had to go out of state. She had the means, thankfully, to go out of state. And by the way, it wasn't a pleasant experience. I don't think Katie Cox was super pumped to get an abortion, but she needed one based on what was going on. Under Project 2025, these laws will only become more intense. I would even argue that they would be open to criminalizing women who get abortions. That's called the abortion abolitionist movement. That's what they would advocate for. We're clearly on that path so far in this video, as this lawyer explains the abortion policies that Project 2025 would advocate for in a Trump administration. Keep that in mind.
Reno wants the CDC to fund studies into the risks and complications of abortion and ensure that it corrects and does not promote misinformation regarding the comparative health and psychological benefits of childbirth versus the health and psychological risks of intentionally taking a human life through abortion. And he plans to, quote, drive investigative review of literature for a variety of issues, including the effect of abortion on prematurity and breast cancer. But there is no link between abortion and breast cancer, and there's no link between abortion and depression. And that's not how science works. You don't start with your preferred policy position and then go and try and create studies to back it up. But Project 2025 isn't just waiting for evidence to come in before implementing its policy goals. They want to reverse the FDA authorization of mifepristone, the most commonly used drug for medication abortions. They claim that it's untested and unsafe, despite the fact that it was approved in America in 2000 and has been in use in France since the 80s. They want to ban mailing mifepristone across state lines under the Comstock Act, which, okay, more on that in a second. Project 2025 wants the federal government to discourage abortion tourism, by which they mean they intend to stop women in states which ban abortion from crossing state lines to get the care they need.
So that means that if Katie Cox lived under a Project 2025 administrative state, she would not be able to access the healthcare that she needed due to the baby having trisomy 18, or the fetus having trisomy 18. I think that's how you say it. Sorry if I'm wrong, if I'm mispronouncing it, but that's my point, right? Is that they want a federal abortion ban. And by the way, the whole attack on abortificants, pills that would induce an abortion, is very much out of the abortion abolitionist playbook. Just keep that in mind.
They also want to block any federal money going to organizations like Planned Parenthood, which provides both abortion care and a whole array of other health services. So if you want to be screened for breast or cervical cancer at Planned Parenthood, well, you are just out of luck.
Yep.
And you know, if you don't want people to invoke the Handmaid's Tale when they're talking about your program, maybe don't use the words abortion surveillance and complain that the government isn't tracking abortions closely enough, and put in writing that you plan to force doctors to ask women why they're choosing to have an abortion and then report the answer to the federal government.
There it is, right? It's not about small government. They have no problem weaponizing the government to enforce their theocratic beliefs that are based on a very much Christian fundamentalist perspective of all these issues. Keep that in mind. Like that's what's behind all of this. And you're seeing the fruit. You're essentially watching in real time if Doug Wilson and Joel Webbin and William Wolf and whoever else, insert Christian, Sean Foyt, if they got their way, Charlie Kirk, and they were giving a blank playbook of, hey, how would you run America? You're looking at it so far. This is what it looks like.
So if you have a period tracker on your phone, no, you don't. Run. And it's not just abortion that these Project 2025 guys are so weird about.
Here we go.
They have a lot of thoughts about birth control, too.
Here we
They
go.
want to ban the morning after pill, which they call a potential abortifacient. It is not. They want to ban medical schools from teaching new doctors how to safely perform an abortion. And they want to cut government funding for condoms from the Women's Health Initiative because they say that condoms have nothing to do with protecting women's health, which suggests a fundamental lack of understanding of human biology.
Yeah, okay, this is huge. This is abortion abolitionist movement. It has it written all over the place. Joel Webbin is on camera saying that in his Christian nationalist world, they want to go through a CVS and just dump all the contraceptives down the drain, right? And this is the great irony of this so-called pro-life movement, is that they actually don't really want people to reduce the amount of unplanned pregnancies. They don't want to actually cut it off at the root. They're not willing to expand contraceptives, which in theory, by their own logic, would stop children from being murdered. Because if a person ever gets pregnant because they have access to contraceptives, be it birth control, condom, etc., or even just better sex education, that would prevent people from getting pregnant unplanned, which would reduce the amount of abortions that happen. But look at what they actually want to do. They want to erase those things. So they actually want people to get pregnant more often, even if it's unplanned, and then give them absolutely no way, right? No option to reverse course. That's not freedom at all. That doesn't promote human flourishing at all. That doesn't think about the people who are involved in the act of procreation at all. It's completely backwards. This is not a pro-life movement at all. This is a pro-birth movement. That's what this actually is. When you say you want contraceptives gone, you don't want condoms handed out, you're saying you're pro-birth. You just want people to have as many babies as possible, consequences be damned. And of course, if they need help, we're sure as hell not going to give them food stamps, because that would be socialism. What a mess this would be.
Can this same procedure then be done in a pregnancy? Swallowing a camera and helping the doctor determine what the situation is with the
Mr. Chairman and Representative, it cannot be done in pregnancy simply because when you swallow a pill, it would not end up in the vagina.
Fascinating.
Instead, they want the CDC to update its public messaging about the unsurpassed effectiveness of modern fertility awareness-based methods of family planning and stop publishing communications that conflate such methods with the long-eclipsed rhythm or calendar methods. Fertility awareness-based methods involve tracking your menstrual cycle and abstaining from sex during ovulation when you're most likely to become pregnant. The rhythm method involves tracking your menstrual cycle and abstaining from sex during ovulation when you're most likely to become pregnant. Neither one of these provides any protection from sexually transmitted infections, and both have a roughly 20% failure rate over a year. Or as they used to say back in the day, you know what they call people who use the rhythm method? Parents. Birth control pills, IUDs, and even condoms are more than 98% effective at preventing pregnancy. So when Project 2025 talks about the unsurpassed effectiveness of so-called natural family planning, they're maybe leaving out one or two relevant data points. But at least it's legal to ship an ovulation monitor through the mail, because one of the ways Project 2025 contemplates reducing access to birth control and abortion is by reviving the Comstock Act, an 1873 statute that made it illegal to use the post office to send birth control and pornography. It was named for Anthony Comstock, an anti-masturbation activist who claimed that books are feeders for brothels and burned tons of them.
He's the original purity culture.
The law was immediately and successfully challenged on First Amendment grounds, but it remains on the books, and Project 2025 envisions using it to prevent the shipment of medication abortion drugs and anything else they consider an abortifacient, including many popular birth control devices and medicines. But what should the government do to prevent the spread of STIs? Well, Project 2025 has a plan for that too, and that plan is to encourage us all to get married. No, I'm serious. Their plan to stop gonorrhea is to focus on strengthening marriage and sexual risk avoidance.
Yeah, and I was going to say this, but I'm glad that she did. The reason why they're not concerned about STIs or STDs is because their solution is that people get married to one partner, they save themselves for marriage, they only have sex with one person, the end. They literally have a fantasy about how humanity should function. And not only do they not care about the reality of the situation, the fact is that many people do have more than one partner throughout their lifetime, they ignore all that and say, well, that's just consequences. So why would we even try to stop you from getting an STD? It's incredibly cruel. It's unrealistic. And again, it comes out of their so-called biblical worldview, which you have to ignore a lot of chapters and verses in the Bible that clearly demonstrate polygamy and polyamory. Like, I don't know, David, a man after God's own heart, having 8 wives. You have to ignore those parts and create your own legitimizing narrative, we can say, that the Bible's clear here, and because of that, everyone in America, every person, Christian or not, needs to abide by these rules, and the government will promote those things and then do its best to make sure that condoms and whatever other aspects of birth control are reduced. This is not good for anyone.
And although the Supreme Court legalized gay marriage in 2015, the Heritage Foundation guys do not mean happily married gay couples. They mean heterosexual couples.
That's right.
Because, quote, families comprised of a married mother, father, and their children are the foundation of a well-ordered nation and healthy society. And so, for the sake of child well-being, programs should affirm that children require and deserve both the love and nurturing of a mother and the play and protection of a father.
The way that they describe a mother and a father reeks of patriarchy. It reeks of it. It reeks of Doug Wilson. It's like if Doug Wilson himself wrote that line. It's gross.
In fact, it's not just gay marriage that's in the Project 2025 crosshairs. This is a plan to erase LGBTQ plus people from public life entirely.
Yep.
The authors of Project 2025 seem to think that most of the nation's problems could be solved if we could just get rid of gender identity, or what they call the unscientific notion that men can become women and vice versa. For instance, they'll, quote, restore standards of lethality and excellence to the U.S. military by kicking out everyone who is transgender or HIV positive.
Unreal.
To de-wokeify foreign aid, the government should remove all references, examples, definitions, photos, and language on USAID websites, in agency publications and policies, and in all agency contracts and grants that include the following terms: gender, gender equality, gender equity, gender diverse individuals, gender aware, gender sensitive, etc. It should also remove references to abortion, reproductive health, and sexual and reproductive rights, and controversial sexual education materials.
More First Amendment goodness, right? Oh, man. All these people love to talk about the First Amendment. They love when Elon Musk brings back Nick Fuentes on Twitter or X because free speech. Those same people are the ones saying we have to erase these terms. We have to erase these terms that describe people that are outside of the hierarchical nature of what we believe God intended creation to be. That's what this is all about. Ultimately, friends, this is a theology on paper recommended as law. And the theology states that God created everything in a very specific way. Men are on top, mainly white men, of course. And then we have women underneath of that, children underneath of that. And if you're not heteronormative, if you're not cisgendered, you are just abominable and you have no place in society. That's what this means. This is what it's always been about. This is what they believe. And now they want to put it into law.
The solution to all the nation's ills, besides marriage, of course, is to roll back the Great Awakening by removing protections for transgender students, forcing schools to out kids to their parents, banning gender-affirming care for minors, and rolling back bans on discriminating against LGBTQ plus people at work and in public accommodations.
It's unreal.
They even want to revoke the National Education Organization's public charter because the nation's largest teachers union, quote, promotes radical racial and gender ideologies in schools. And how are they going to fix public education? Get rid of those pesky pronouns. This would apparently make it illegal for teachers to respect their students' request to be called by anything, quote, other than the name listed on a student's birth certificate without the written permission of a student's parents or guardians. This would apparently ban nicknames, but it's a small price to pay to win the war on woke. Sorry, Billy. Oops, William.
Right, right. So what she's saying here is that what they're saying is that a teacher can't call a student by any other name other than the name given on their birth certificate unless their parent approves. So in theory, if Billy is in school and his nickname is, who knows, Rockstar, that's a bad nickname, but whatever, and the teacher calls him Rockstar a lot, that's illegal. That's what we're talking about here. And it's done in order to make sure that if there's a trans student at school that wants to be called a different name than the one given to them at birth, they can intrude and say, no, your parents have to be aware of that. That's what it comes down to. It's again, it's all about the government being used as a weapon, right, to maintain these sexual and gender hierarchies and orders that trans people and trans children who exist, by the way, these people exist. They're here. It's real. Those people who exist have nowhere to go. They have to conform into this specific worldview that forces them to their own detriment. By the way, there's been studies showing this, their own detriment, into whatever it is that they were assigned at birth, right? It's detrimental.
While they're at it, they want to make DEI illegal too.
Of course they do.
Because if it's not trans people ruining everything, it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. In fact, the Project 2025s are so spun up about what they call critical race theory that they want to conduct purges at organizations like the Treasury Department. This document proposes to identify any Treasury Department employee at any level who attended diversity training under the Biden or Obama administration and treat the participation in any critical race theory or DEI initiative without objecting on constitutional or moral grounds as per se grounds for termination of employment. And
Wow.
the Project 2025 guys don't just want to fire anybody in government who sat through a diversity workshop. They want the Justice Department to, quote, use the full force of federal prosecutorial resources to investigate and prosecute all state and local governments, institutions of higher education, corporations, and any other private employers who are engaged in discrimination in violation of constitutional and legal requirements.
So what they're saying is that when you see the word discrimination here, they're not talking about racism. They're talking about if DEI is used, right? If certain language is used, then they want the government in its full power to investigate and prosecute all state and local government institutions of higher education and corporations. So essentially what they're saying is, on one hand, we have to really abolish the federal administrative state, give power back to the states. Unless you're caught doing DEI shit, then we want the federal government to go after you local governments. We want you, federal government, to go after higher education, right, in the state of New Jersey, Delaware, whatever. So it's not really ever about what they say it's about. There's always context, and this is what it looks like.
By which they mean they want to prosecute employers they believe are making too many diversity hires. And
Yep.
if that happens to have the chilling effect of discouraging companies from hiring people who are not white men, well, they're good with it. Let's take a break and talk about who exactly is behind Project 2025.
Yes.
Project 2025 is the brainchild of Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, and Russ Vaught, the former head of the Office of Management and Budget in the Trump White House. And to staff this thing up, they brought in Trump's former personnel chief, Johnny McEntee.
Johnny McEntee, she's going to show you who he is. It is, when you see his video that she'll show in a minute, your mind just might explode that this is the person behind Project 2025. It's just so evident what they actually believe.
Heritage is the OG conservative think tank founded during the Nixon administration to advocate for pro-business policies and against the global spread of communism. It's been highly influential in every Republican administration since Reagan, and during Democratic administrations dedicated itself to opposing everything from single-payer health care to student loan relief.
Yep.
Since the end of the Cold War, heritage has increasingly thrown itself into culture war issues, particularly opposing abortion and gay rights. Kevin Roberts is a dedicated conservative stalwart who headed up the lobbying arm at Heritage before becoming its leader. He's praised Hungary's proto-fascist president Viktor Orban, who says that Hungarians do not want to become a mixed race, and Roberts is open that his organization's mission is institutionalizing Trumpism.
Okay, this is key because Trump tried to roll back and tried to deflect like he doesn't know what Project 2025 is. That's nonsense. That is absolute nonsense. You do not create a coalition of 100+ conservative organizations, spend 4+ years creating a 900-page playbook full of details of what you want the next conservative president to do, only to have that conservative nominee be like, Project 2025, I've never heard of that before. Of course not. That's not how this works. And also, it should terrify you that this man, Kevin Roberts, is praising someone like Viktor Orban, which, by the way, Trump has also done. Do you not see the connection of authoritarian leaders that are also racist in nature? We don't want to become a mixed race. That's a key call, especially from the Stephen Wolfe Christian nationalist types, which we've covered on this channel before. You can go back a few episodes and watch my live with Kevin Carnahan, where we unpacked a Stephen Wolfe talk, where he essentially is more racist than the KKK. So you have to put these pieces together. These policies will make these ideas and these theologies a lived reality and enshrine them into law.
So while Trump insists that he knows nothing about Project 2025, Roberts has been clear that he and Trump are part of the same movement, and he is laying out the agenda for the next Trump administration.
Yep.
Russ Vaught is a self-described Christian nationalist who serves as the current policy director of the Republican National Committee. In 2016, he wrote that Muslims do not simply have a deficient theology, they do not know God because they have rejected Jesus Christ, his son, and they stand condemned. He believes we're living in a post-constitutional moment, and the only solution is to massively centralize power in the office of the president, conscripting the entire federal bureaucracy as a tool to reorder society in accordance with conservative values.
This is coming from R.J. Rushdoony's teachings in the 80s, okay? This is a deep-seated theonomy, or you could call it a Seven Mountain Mandate, another way of thinking about this. Russ Vaught, right, who writes policy for the RNC, believes that he and his people as Christians have a calling to restructure and reorganize the power systems and how power is distributed throughout the government to make it a Christian nation again. That's what this is all about. This is Christian nationalism 101. 101. Clearly, this should terrify us.
If you lived through the first Trump administration, you may remember it was something of a chaotic time, with the White House pumping out executive orders banning all Muslims from entering the country, or kicking all transgender people out of the military, or announcing the immediate withdrawal of all troops from Afghanistan, or declaring an emergency and raiding military funds to build a border wall. Roberts and Vaught think that the problem wasn't that Trump's ideas were crazy or illegal, but that there were too many disloyal civil servants who refused to implement them.
But on the point of follow-up question, is there a policy solution or proposal in this book, which is going to be put out imminently, that you're most interested in, you're most excited about?
Well, I think one that's gotten a lot of press
This
is
is Russ
Schedule
Vaught.
F. And Schedule F was something that materialized at the end of the administration that the president did, to be able to say that if you're working on policy for the president, you're an at-will employee.
So this time around,
This
they
is
prepared
key.
Project 2025 as a blueprint so they can hit the ground running. And to make sure there's no deep state sabotage, they plan to destroy longstanding protections for career government employees who currently can't be fired for perceived disloyalty. Instead, much of the federal government will be staffed with political appointees who serve at the pleasure of the president. Johnny McEntee rose from being Trump's body man during the 2016 campaign to running the Presidential Personnel Office, which staffs the entire executive branch.
Think about that. A guy who comes from nowhere with no credentials, no expertise, no training, gets propped up because he's a loyalist to Trump. That does not help anyone besides Trump. This Schedule F thing, by the way, is a huge deal. John Oliver did a great job talking about this a few weeks ago on his show, so you can watch it on there as well. But I'm telling you, if this actually happens, we're in deep doo-doo, because essentially what's happening is, instead of someone being qualified for the job, meaning they have a skill set and they have expertise in a certain area, it depends upon your political allegiance to not just any president, but to Trump, and being willing to do whatever he wants. That is not good for democracy. That's not good for any of our neighbors. It's not good for anyone but the people in charge who want the power.
During the final year of Trump's presidency, McEntee began administering loyalty tests at the various executive branch agencies in attempting to push out anyone who had expressed a negative opinion of Trump or his policies.
Free speech.
In conjunction with Project 2025, McEntee is assembling a presidential personnel database, preparing to staff the next Trump administration with MAGA faithful. He
There you
also
go.
started a dating app called The Right Stuff, so that Trump supporters won't get their feelings hurt by all the swipe lefts on Tinder.
What are you looking for in a partner?
They just have to be a conservative.
Definitely someone that wants to have kids.
I like an independent man. Personally, I like the alpha male vibe.
Which is weird, because who wouldn't want to date a guy like this?
So I always keep this fake Hollywood money in my car, so when a homeless person asks for money, then I give them like a fake $5 bill, so I feel good about myself, they feel good, and then when they go to use it, they get arrested, so I'm actually like helping clean up the community, you know, getting them off the street.
Can you believe this, bro? What he just said. By the way, his Instagram's even there's worse content on his Instagram. I want to be clear that the so-called Christian perspective that is fueling Project 2025 has people like that shaping policy who thinks it's a good idea to give unsheltered people fake money, so that way when they try to use it, they get arrested. How is that taking care of the poor? How is that advocating for the marginalized? Like, again, what Jesus are these people reading in the 4 gospel accounts? I would love to know. I would love to know. That person thinks that's a good idea. That person is shaping policy for Project 2025 and for a future Trump administration. Are you putting the pieces together yet? Are you seeing what is at stake if this system gets enacted for our most marginalized neighbors? It's crazy. We have a very strict policy, as you all know, friends, of non-dehumanization. I have a lot of temptation to dehumanize that guy and call him a lot of names. I won't do it, but I really want to, because nothing makes me more irate than watching white privileged men say stuff like that about those who are under their boot. Ugh, drives me crazy.
Yeah, that's really him. Okay. Now let's talk about what Project 2025 would do to
good.
education in this country, aside from banning pronouns. Maybe you're a little kid just trying to figure out how to drink your juice and play in the sandbox and recognize your ABCs. Project 2025 would eliminate Head Start, which subsidizes childcare for 820,000 poor kids between the ages of 3 and 5. Or maybe you're a kid who relies on getting lunch and possibly breakfast at school. Project 2025 wants to cut way back on what it calls a federal catering program and axe meals in the summer for kids who aren't in summer school.
How is this pro-family? Like, I really, again, like, think about all these terms that these Christian nationalists use all the time. We're pro-family. We're pro-life. We care about kids. We want to protect them from being groomed. And then the same breath, in their policy handbook for the next conservative president, they also would like to cut back all federal funding to feed these kids. Why? We live in the world's richest country. We can easily afford. I want my tax dollars to go towards feeding children in school. And do you know why? Not only is it ethically the right thing to do, especially as a Christian, like just read Matthew 25, but selfishly, statistically, kids who eat in school, meaning kids who don't go hungry, tend to do better in school, which gives them better grades, which means they have a better shot at higher education, which means that they have a better chance of getting a high-paying job, which actually stimulates the economy. It's actually very much pro-economy to take care of children in school, to feed them lunch, to not make them or let them be worried about where they're going to get their meal from. It helps parents to know, right, that they can because we live in a dystopian nightmare of late-stage capitalism, that both parents probably have to work to survive in America right now, and that their kids are being taken care of at school. That's a pro-family policy. But for them, that needs to go. It is crazy to me. It's mind-blowing. My head just wants to pop off when I hear this shit.
Oh, you're a 4th grader who isn't enrolled in classes this summer? Guess you can wait till September to eat. On the
Right.
bright side, during the next administration, kids will be able to earn more pocket money by taking on dangerous jobs that are currently off limits to them. Project 2025 plans to repeal hazard order regulations which bar teenagers from risky jobs in factories and mines because,
It's crazy.
quote, some young adults show an interest in inherently dangerous jobs.
People don't want children working anymore. In fact, they want them in school now.
During their most productive years, when
This
their
is
tiny
satire.
fingers are still small enough to fit into the crevices of the machinery?
Maybe you're
No, but really, I mean, this was the argument back in the day. During the early stages of the Industrial Revolution, when there was no regulation around who can work and for how long, kids were exploited as young as sometimes 5 or 6 at times. But they were working long days in dangerous places, and these rules exist for a reason, to protect kids, right? Again, isn't this the mantra from the Christian nationalists, to protect the children? Unless what? They want to work in a coal mine? What are we doing? Why is this even in this playbook? It's crazy.
applying to college and you need a student loan. Project 2025 aims to end federally subsidized student loans on the theory that the marketplace will do it more cheaply and efficiently.
LOL.
And if the government does make education loans, Project 2025 wants to treat those as an economic investment which must be repaid in interest and principal rather than an investment in the education of the American population. They want to roll back all loan forgiveness and end loan abatements for borrowers who do socially valuable things with their degrees, like provide health care in underserved rural areas. How will they solve the rural health care crisis? Well, they'll reduce the regulatory burden. According to the Center for American Progress, a liberal think tank, borrowers would pay about $3,000 more a year under this plan.
I believe this because they're capitalists. They want less government regulation, let the free market flourish, which always tends to put the most powerful people on top who set the rules for everyone else to gain the most from those people. The student loan industry is history's biggest freaking scam. And by the way, there's a problem with colleges too and how they become more corporatized, right? Again, it's complicated, but my point is that between higher education becoming more of a corporation than an actual higher education in structure, and these student loans, corporations and higher ed are raking in $1 billion of revenue and profit at the expense of 18-year-old students just trying to get a higher education degree to go into the workforce. That's unethical. Again, like not only what Bible are you reading, but think about the implications of this. You want an educated population because that creates more jobs for an economy. That also creates more spending power. They spend more money. Other businesses do good. Like, think about like what you're saying here. Why would you want to make it harder to access higher education? Makes no sense unless you're a Christian nationalist, and then it makes sense.
In fact, the Project 2025 guys think the Department of Education, which they call
Yes.
a convenient one-stop shop for the woke education cartel,
My God.
should be abolished in its entirety. And speaking of stuff they'd like to kill, you can wave goodbye to free weather reports.
Really quick, before we go to this, abolishing the Department of Education is straight out of the R.J. Rushdoony theonomy playbook. R.J. Rushdoony, he was one of the early architects in the 80s of what we call theonomy today. People like Doug Wilson that picked up on him, Joel Webb, and many others. He wants the Department of Education abolished. That's why this is being done. It's all about the Christian nationalist undertones that lead to these results. The education cartel. What are we talking about? The public education system serves millions of children. Our teachers are underpaid, and people in these spaces want to make it even more difficult for not only those teachers to be paid, but for those students to get a quality education, because their presupposition is that public education is inherently bad. That makes no sense, especially when you realize that public education was started by Christians. So that's what's beneath this, is a very strict theonomy, theocracy. There's a lot of labels that we can call it that say this is how God has ordered things. And it always results, by the way, the ordering always results in these people being the ones to gain the most power, the most control, the most wealth, while other people suffer. Keep that in mind.
Chapter on the Environmental Protection Agency is written by Mandy Gunasekara, who was chief of staff at the EPA under Trump. She previously served as House counsel to the late Senator James Inhofe, who once waved a snowball around on the floor of the Senate to prove that climate change wasn't real.
Unreal.
Yep, that's her sitting right behind him. Gunasekara refers to the, quote, perceived threat of climate change and advocates rolling back pollution standards across the board. Elsewhere in the Project 2025 blueprint are plans to end all subsidies for clean energy, concentrate on producing food cheaply, whatever the cost to the environment, eliminate energy efficiency standards for appliances, roll back mileage standards for gas-powered cars, and more or less ban the entire federal government from taking climate change into account when crafting U.S. policy.
This is a disaster. I recommend the work of Katharine Hayhoe on this. She's one of the world's leading climatologists. She's a Christian. The data and how they collect it is so clear about what's happening. People like this who want to do this stuff are literally pushing us off a cliff. And I don't mean that hyperbolically. Like, just go look into how scientists have figured out that the climate's warming, who's responsible, how much human activity is complicit in this. Like, it's been worked out, friends. They have systems and they have procedures and they have experiments that they do to verify all this stuff. When people tell you climate change isn't real or it's not, it's overblown, they are lying to you. That's an anti-intellectual position to take. Please just do a little bit of research. Listen to my own interview with Katharine Hayhoe. Read her book. It's out there. This would be a disaster.
It'll start getting cooler. You just watch.
And
Unreal.
They'd like to withdraw us from the Paris Climate Agreement, the multinational framework designed to reduce the impact of climate change worldwide. Toward that end, they plan to get rid of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, aka NOAA, which houses multiple environmental agencies, including the National Weather Service. Thomas Gilman, Assistant Secretary of Commerce under Trump, wrote that together these form a colossal operation that has become one of the main drivers of the climate change alarm industry and as such is harmful to future U.S. prosperity.
I can't express to you how anti-intellectual all of this is. What they're saying is, despite all these organizations from different countries that have found similar findings in all of their experiments, there is they sound like conspiratorial. There's a deep state agenda to drive this climate alarm industry. For what benefit? What's the benefit of telling people that if we're not careful, if we don't reduce emissions, we're going to be in a lot of trouble? What is the benefit of telling people your scientific findings after going through the scientific process? It makes no sense. These people are so anti-intellectual. They stare in the face of data and reason and evidence, and they go, nah, it's a hoax. It's unbelievable.
He doesn't believe in the fatal conceit of planning for the unplannable. And if he gets his way, that will include planning to take an umbrella when you leave the house, because currently the National Weather Service provides free weather data as part of its environmental information services. But Gilman thinks the government should fully commercialize its forecasting operations and sell that data to private companies so that they can monetize it. Ka-ching! And now, let's talk about something near and dear to Donald Trump's heart.
At a rally in New Hampshire, Trump railed against the southern border crisis and people crossing illegally into the U.S.
They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done. They poison.
Trump has long dreamed of mass deportations and recently promised to deport 5% of the U.S. population, including many of the workers we rely on to supply us with cheap meat and produce. Project 2025 calls for the Department of Homeland Security to be replaced with a new standalone border and immigration agency at the cabinet level, effectively centralizing power in the president. The Project 2025 guys get very touchy when people accuse them of planning to build concentration camps, but they are calling to immediately round up any undocumented person, no matter how long they've been here or how little danger they pose to the community, and turn them over to Immigration and Customs Enforcement for detention. They're planning for a significant increase in detention space, raising the daily available number of beds to 100,000. And that
Notice, by the way, two things. Notice the concentration of power in the president. These are the people who tell you to fight tyranny. They're the people who tell you that the left is tyrannical. And they actively have a 900-page playbook that would give the sitting president, their president, by the way, unprecedented amounts of power to do things with no checks and balances. That is tyranny. That's the problem. And same thing with this immigration. They want to raise the number of beds to 100,000. They want to build new camps where they're rounding up people in our country who are here and that are undocumented. Despite the work that they've done, despite the families that they built, Despite the fact that they have no criminal history, they just want to mass round them up and put them in camps run by the government. Do you hear this? And again, as Christians, how is this welcoming the immigrant? How is this welcoming the foreigner? How is this trying to build a more equitable system that actually documents these people so they can pay taxes and give back to the economy, right? And that way they can get driver's licenses. They can become able-bodied people in society and be taken care of by what our system has to offer, as little as it is. Where's the Christian ethic in this? But this is the Christian nationalist playbook. You're watching it unfold and be explained to you by a lawyer in real time.
Number would include children as well. The author of this chapter is Gene Hamilton, who drafted Trump's child separation policy the last time around.
More family values
were taken from their parents by the U.S. government, after which DHS simply lost track of hundreds of them who were never reunited with their families.
Unreal.
Hamilton plans to restart this program, deporting migrant children to their home countries as quickly as possible. This would require ending the Flores settlement agreement, which requires the government to place unaccompanied children in non-secure facilities that are state licensed to care for dependent children. Instead, they'll return to, quote, large-scale use of temporary facilities, for example, tents. And they don't mean this. They mean this.
Right, exactly. I mean, they want to put children in tents. So when you hear the talking point that Republicans want to separate children from their families, or they want to put kids in tents, or they want to create camps, concentration camps of sorts, they're not exactly exaggerating. It's right here in the playbook for the next conservative president to enact. And remember, the Heritage Foundation has deep ties to all of the former conservative presidents, starting with Reagan. This is not the first time they've done this, but this is the first time they're being exposed on a mass level. This is the future under Christian nationalism, friends. I hope you're paying attention.
So yeah, we'll be doing the kids in tents thing again. Project 2025 plans to repeal Section 235 of the William Wilberforce Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act of 2008, aka the TVPRA, which provides numerous immigration benefits to unaccompanied alien children and only encourages more parents to send their children across the border illegally and unaccompanied. And they want to cancel temporary protected status, which prevents the deportation of all manner of refugees, including thousands of Ukrainians who fled after Putin invaded their country.
This is also part of the Christian nationalist ethos. So this is not in every space of Christian nationalism because the tent is somewhat large, but in the more reform space, and particularly people like Stephen Wolf and Doug Wilson, they have a very big focus on keeping people to their ethnic bounds. We'll just put it that way. And so for them, reducing immigration is a way to keep America full of the proper type of Americans that usually look and act and think a certain way. And we don't want, that to be diluted with foreigners coming into our country. This is a huge underlying piece of the puzzle of why they're so anti-immigrant. And then you have people like Charlie Kirk saying that there's actually a great replacement happening where these foreigners are invading our country to replace the voting body, to change the political landscape. That's also what David Duke, former Grand Wizard of the KKK, said in the 80s. He used the same phrase, a great replacement. This is known as the great replacement theory. These ideas, these concepts get institutionalized or they get put into law through things like this. You are seeing what that looks like put into practice where a government can enforce it. It's terrifying. It's anti-human. It is harmful for our neighbors. It is antichrist. It's terrible.
They intend to end H-2 temporary worker programs and drastically curtail the use of T visas for victims of human trafficking. They'd also like America's refugee system to be pay to play with much higher fees on the theory that people fleeing for their lives probably have several $100s hidden in their backpacks to pay for processing.
Exactly.
Much of this would require congressional cooperation. But if they don't get it, the Project 2025 guys advise the Trump administration to simply pull the fire alarm and claim emergency authorization to do it anyway.
Consolidate
they should, quote,
power.
Create an authority akin to the Title 42 Public Health Authority that has been used during the COVID-19 pandemic to expel illegal aliens across the border immediately when certain non-health conditions are met, such as loss of the operational control of the border. Actually, Trump did exactly that the first time around when Congress refused to appropriate funds for his Mexico border wall. You know, the one Mexico is going to pay for. And Project 2025 wants him to do it again, but this time for the entire immigration system.
Yep.
Just claim you've lost control of the border and do whatever you want. Let the Supreme Court sort it out later, right?
And then we'll get another bad ruling, and then we'll end up in the Supreme Court, and hopefully we'll get a fair shake.
This is how it works for Christian nationalists. They are not committed to democratic norms. If democracy benefits them, they will love it. They will use it. They will protect it. The second it works against them, it must be dismantled. We have to consolidate power in our authoritarian strongman. We have to look at the playbook in other countries such as Hungary, where they're farther ahead of this process. It doesn't look good, friends. It's not a good look. It doesn't help the economy. It doesn't help our neighbors. But this is what we're looking at under our Project 2025 agenda enacted through the next conservative administration.
Well, that's all horrible. But remember like 20 minutes ago when we said these guys want to ban porn? Well, they do. In fact, they want to throw anyone who makes or distributes pornography in jail. Here's what Robert said about it in the foreword to Project 2025. Pornography, manifested today in the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexualization of children, for instance, is not a political Gordian knot inextricably binding up disparate claims about free speech, property rights, sexual liberation, and child welfare. It has no claim to First Amendment protection. Its purveyors are child predators and misogynistic exploiters of women. Their product is as addictive as any illicit drug and as psychologically destructive as any crime. Pornography should be outlawed. The people who produce and distribute it should be imprisoned. Educators and public librarians who purvey it should be classified as registered sex offenders. And telecommunications and technology firms that facilitate its spread should be shuttered.
Wow.
Okay, it's a lot.
Yep.
First of all, pornography is 100% protected by the First Amendment. In a 1969 case called Stanley v. Georgia, the Supreme Court ruled that the First Amendment protects the right to private possession of pornography. The court held unanimously that if the First Amendment means anything, it means that a state has no business telling a man sitting alone in his house what books he may read or what films he may watch. Our whole constitutional heritage rebels at the thought of giving government the power to control men's minds.
Exactly. Listen. This is not a moral claim to pornography. Okay? That's not what this is about. In a secular society ruled by our Constitution, pornography is clearly covered by the First Amendment. For this point, the idea of giving the government the power to control what you can and can't watch in your house violates one of the core principles of American democracy. This is the same First Amendment that Christian nationalists yell whenever they feel like they're being persecuted for their faith. Oh, you're violating my First Amendment rights. So again, it's not about equity for these people. It's not about the First Amendment applying to things that even they would never participate in or watch or might even find reprehensible, right? It is, no. We're going to redefine these things that, again, benefit us and take rights away from other people because of what our morality says, based on our very strict, narrow, fundamentalist, militant understanding of the English Protestant Bible. It's anti-constitutional, despite your moral qualms with this.
And in a 1973 case called Miller v. California, the Supreme Court articulated what became known as the Miller test. Under the First Amendment, the government can only ban speech if it's obscene. And they don't mean obscene like gross. They mean that you can only ban materials which, quote, appeal to a morbid interest in sex as opposed to a healthy interest in sex, which depict or describe in a patently offensive way sexual conduct specifically defined by the applicable state law. And the material must, taken as a whole, lack serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. And while the Project 2025 guys may have a moral objection to pornography, that doesn't mean they can outlaw it. So don't go deleting your browser history just yet. But let's cut the BS. They don't really intend to shut down half the internet and shutter the billion-dollar porn industry, and you know that because the second part of that quote talks about arresting teachers and public librarians for distributing it.
Bingo. And by the way, X, Twitter, formerly Twitter, is like the Christian nationalist safe haven. They love Elon. There's porn all over Twitter. And those bros are on Twitter every day posting. They don't ever call for Twitter to get shut down. They don't call for Elon to erase the porn. It's not actually about the porn. And as we're seeing, it's actually about something else.
Which is something that is not happening. When was the last time you walked into a school library and said, Miss Sparkle, can you please take me to your X-rated movie section? That's not a thing.
Right.
But what is a thing is Florida's Don't Say Gay law that tried to make it a crime for school libraries to carry books that had gay or trans characters, or for teachers to talk about gender identity, or to even acknowledge that gay people exist. Roberts talks about children suffering the toxic normalization of transgenderism with drag queens and pornography invading their school libraries. And pornography manifested today in the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexualization of children. He's not trying to ban porn. He's trying to ban anyone who treats LGBTQ plus people like they have a right to exist in society.
That is 100% on the money. This has been one of the biggest Christian nationalist outcries for years now. And I know that because I go to these events. I go to Turning Point USA. I track what they're saying. I hear what they're saying. It's not about porn. It's about queer people. The grooming rhetoric is not actually about protecting kids. If it was, they would be up in arms at the mountain of stories of pastors and other clergy sexually abusing children. But they're silent on that. Turning Point USA, for example, is deeply embedded with Dream City Church in Arizona. Luke Barnett's the pastor there. In fact, when Trump was convicted, his first rally was held at Dream City Church. Well, Dream City Academy, which is also a Turning Point USA Academy, actually had a sexual predator who was a teacher at that school get arrested for preying on one of the students. Never talked about by Turning Point. Never acknowledged by Dream City Church publicly. No call that, oh my God, we're so sorry that we had a groomer in our schools. We're changing our policies. No, under the radar, completely. Turning Point USA at their pastor summit last year had a sponsor there whose founder tried to solicit a minor for sex. Not a peep. In fact, when it was brought up by Rolling Stone magazine, Charlie Kirk said, this man's been forgiven. Where's the grace? It's not about protecting kids. It's not about getting rid of actual groomers. It's about minimizing the right to exist of queer and transgender people. That's what it comes down to every single time.
We're back to the pronouns again. But this time, if you use them right, they'll put you in jail. So much for local control and keeping government out of your business.
Yeah, as we mentioned, Project 2025 is so toxic that even Trump has tried to distance himself from it. He posted, quote, I know nothing about Project 2025 and I have no idea who is behind it. I disagree with some of the things they're saying, and some of the things they're saying are absolutely ridiculous and abysmal. Now, this is all despite the fact that many of Project 2025's authors are part of his administration and are likely to be pegged for a second Trump administration. But Rolling Stone reports that, quote, Trump has been privately and very bitterly complaining about the abortion policies laid out in the lengthy Project 2025 manifesto and trashing the Project 2025 linked lunatics who keep demanding unpopular abortion bans and restrictions.
Now, to be clear, the reason why he's saying that is because he knows how unpopular these policies are with broad America. He doesn't actually have a dog in the fight. Trump is amoral. He has no values. There's no integrity. There's no principles for Trump. He just wants whatever gets him the most power, which is why he can flip-flop so quickly with his own base, right? So make no mistake, though, that's not going to change the people that he brings into his administration. So Trump can say, oh, I don't agree. This is terrible. But if he gets power, these people are the first up to be enacted or to be employed in his administration to write these policies.
Further, they report that one of Project 2025's contributors said, quote, Trump can try to distance himself from this, but 70 to 80% of the people who wrote the book are going to be in his second administration.
What did I just say? Exactly right.
The cabinet undersecretaries, assistant secretaries, the senior advisors. They're all going to be the foot soldiers in a second Trump administration. You can't look at this constellation of organizations and people without seeing that they're all his people. And now Paul Dans, the director of Project 2025, is stepping down from the project, potentially to give Trump additional cover. Now, some have reported this as Project 2025 shutting down, but that doesn't really make any sense because it's a policy paper. The work is largely done and the roadmap is laid.
Okay, we'll stop there. So, yeah, I mean, friends, I'm glad I was able to do this because I love the fact that they are lawyers who are able to kind of explain in layman's terms what's going on. This has Christian nationalists written all over it. It's evident to me, and probably to you by now, that the people behind this project are Christian nationalists. They want, at a minimum, theocracy light, because all of their views come from a very specific conservative Christian framework about how God has ordered things. Now, they're not that direct about their motivation, besides a few things here and there, but because we grew up in these spaces, because we track this stuff, we know what the policies would look like if they got their way. And these guys just gave you the full outworking of what it looks like if Christian nationalists get their way in 2024 or in a future administration. I would love your thoughts on this video. I love your comments. What do you think? I really tried my best to blend their expertise with what I know about Christian nationalism to hopefully help you connect the dots that Project 2025 is a Christian nationalist manifesto that has the support of Christian nationalists all over America that are hoping if Trump gets elected, this policy book will be enacted to reclaim the nation for God. Talk to y'all later.